Hi, I'm Mark. This is Mark's Tech Vlogs on YouTube, and today I'm going to bring you guys a review of the iPhone 12. So the new iPhone came out a couple of weeks ago and mine arrived on the day of release. I brought you guys an unboxing video and I've been using the phone ever since for all the things that I usually use a phone for. This video is going to be my review, but I'm going to do it slightly differently and just try and focus on the things that are different or new and improved rather than talking about all of the specs. Because ultimately it's an iPhone and we kind of know what Apple's recipe for iPhones is now. And so we know the software works well, we know that it's probably going to last you quite a long time, and that generally it just works really well. I want to start this video by saying that for me, probably like most of you guys watching this, I haven't bought this phone just to review it, I bought it as my daily driver. For the last couple of years, I've been using an iPhone 10 and it was fine, it took some good photos, but the battery life was beginning to dwindle and occasionally there was a bit of lagging and I just felt like I needed an upgrade. If you're in the same sort of boat as me, I'm also making an iPhone 10 compared to iPhone 12 video to help you decide what the main differences are and whether you should upgrade. If you want to be first to see that video, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. So let's get started and crack on with the iPhone 12 review. And to start with, I want to talk about the three big things you will notice if you're coming at this iPhone from previous iPhones. The first thing you'll notice, and maybe the most controversial thing, is the new smaller box. The actual size of the box is about half the size of previous year's boxes, and that's because Apple have removed the charging brick and the earphones from the box. Apple's reasoning behind this is that essentially all of us have already got charging bricks and earphones kicking around, and so actually it just contributes to waste to include even more in a box every time you buy a phone. And actually for the most part I think Apple are right, and I think it's really good to take what is probably quite a controversial step for the environment with phones. However, the really odd thing is that the cable they include instead. So with this year's iPhone, inside the box you get a Lightning to USB-C cable. Now again, for most users this probably isn't going to matter because you've probably already got charging cables kicking around, you've probably got wireless chargers, all sorts of things, and actually that cable is probably going to go straight in the drawer. But the really strange thing is when you're talking about removing the charging brick because people have already got them, you then include a cable that doesn't actually fit in the charging bricks they've already got if they've used iPhones previously. I suspect where Apple are getting at with this is that they're kind of expecting you to charge it off your iPad, which has USB-C if you've got one of the newer ones, or perhaps they're expecting you to charge it off of your Mac. However, for the most users, that cable really isn't very useful. The second thing you're going to notice if you're moving to the new iPhone is the new design. It's the first new design we've had since the iPhone 10 a few years ago, and Apple have gone for this kind of square look again, which isn't dissimilar from the iPhone 4. If you go for one of the colour variants, you've kind of got this two-tone effect going on. So for my product red iPhone, the outside of the phone, so the rim around the edges, is this kind of dark metallic red. This dark metallic red is carried across onto the rims of the cameras as well, and then the back of the phone is a glossy red for the most part, which is slightly lighter, and a matte red on that camera bump. The red on the product red certainly isn't as bright as previous years, and it's a really difficult red to describe. I quite like the look of it having used it for a couple of weeks. However, I've heard it described as peachy and a bit pinky, and there's not really a way to describe it because I'm fairly sure it kind of changes depending on the lighting that you're in. But it's probably not quite red. That's probably a good way to describe it. And then the third thing you're going to notice, even if you're coming from the iPhone 11, is that the phone feels lighter. On paper, it is in fact about 12 grams lighter, which isn't a huge amount, although that probably equates to about 10%. However, maybe it's a weight distribution inside the phone, but there really is a noticeable difference in picking this phone up, even compared to last year's model. So those are the three big things you're going to notice initially: a lighter phone, a new design, and a smaller box with less accessories. But let's go on and talk about the rest of the phone and using it. So before we get into big things like the cameras, let's talk a bit about the spec and what you should know about that. So firstly, as we've come to expect from Apple, inside the phone this year you'll find the A14 Bionic chip. This is Apple's latest and greatest chip and means that your phone will run really fast to start with and probably fast for many years to come if it behaves like Apple's other chips have. We've already seen really impressive performance from this chip on some of the iPads we've seen this year, and it's likely that Apple are going to use this chip in the Silicon Macs when they get announced probably next week. In practice, if you've got an iPhone 11, you're probably not going to notice a big speed bump with this processor, but what you will notice is you can now use night mode on all of the cameras. More on that later. There are a few other spec things to talk about, the next being the new MagSafe connector. Essentially, MagSafe is a magnetic wireless charging adapter. It uses magnets on the charger and the back of a phone to make sure it clips on perfectly every time. If you use the official one, you can get up to 20-watt charging, which is a lot faster than standard wireless charging on the iPhone. You do, however, need a 20-watt charging brick as well as the MagSafe accessory, so that could all add up. They also developed some other accessories such as wallets and cases that just clip on, and also enable you to use MagSafe through those. The really interesting thing with MagSafe is going to be to see what other people do in terms of accessories over the next few months and years. It also seems pretty obvious that this is Apple's most definitive nod yet that next year's iPhone won't have the Lightning port. We might see the first portless iPhone. Next, in terms of spec, we should talk about battery life, which on paper is exactly the same as last year's iPhone with up to 17 hours video playback. This is slightly more impressive given that you've got a slightly smaller battery in there to make room for 5G, but it's also worth saying that it kind of depends what you do with a phone. I'm quite a heavy user and I use it out and about, and I use it for a bit of gaming and I use it a lot for social media, and I've found that I get about a day's worth out of it. Now, I'm pretty happy with that because I charge it overnight, and that's more than I was getting with my iPhone 10, which I was having to charge during the day. And so generally, I think for most people, you're going to be pretty happy with the 1-day battery life on this phone. If, however, you do take advantage of the new 5G features, then you're going to find that it drains your battery a bit quicker. This isn't something I've been able to test out, but I will talk a little bit about 5G because that was the thing that got a lot of stage time at Apple's launch event. Now personally, 5G isn't something that I'm likely to use for a while, just because in the UK it's not being rolled out very quickly and I don't live in a town where you can actually use it. However, it is quite an interesting move to put 5G on all of the new iPhones, because actually in a couple of years when it becomes more accessible to people across different places and across different countries, then actually there's going to be more and more people who want 5G who already have a device that supports it. This is particularly useful if you're the sort of person who just buys an iPhone and uses it for several years at a time. And then the final thing we should talk about the spec is the screen. This year, Apple have upgraded all of the iPhone 12 screens to OLED displays. The iPhone 12 has a 6.1-inch OLED display, which is just really nice to use. It's really responsive and it looks great. Coming from an iPhone 10, which was also an OLED display, I can confidently say that actually I really do notice the difference in display quality when it comes to video. On paper, there's not actually a big difference in terms of resolution, but I think they've just improved the quality and the quality of those colours. The display doesn't have the high refresh rate we've been seeing on some of the Android phones this year, but Apple software just makes everything run really smoothly anyway. It's also particularly nice having the 2160 option in the YouTube app to watch videos at an even higher quality than Full HD. When it comes to that front-facing display, Apple have introduced Ceramic Shield. This is basically a way of making that touchscreen stronger, and Apple say it's 4 times stronger than last year's iPhone 11. Now that's a really difficult thing to measure and a very difficult thing to try without throwing your phone out a window, although there are some people who've done that. And as a whole, it seems like, from the people who've done the drop tests, it seems to be a very durable screen. What it is worth saying, however, is that they haven't given the same upgrade to the glass on the back of the phone, and so you're probably going to want to put a case on it, and you might as well just put a screen protector on it anyway. For me, I've just gone for a clear case, just because I wanted to see the design of the phone, but I also wanted to protect it. And that's it for kind of new spec stuff. Everything else is exactly what you'd expect. There's Bluetooth, it can make calls, it copes with mobile data fine, the Wi-Fi's great. It's all the kind of spec stuff that you just expect on phones now. And of course, if you're setting it up from a previous iPhone, you've got the addition of it just being super easy to get all of your stuff onto your new phone. So let's talk about the main thing that we're talking about with phones these days, and that is the cameras. Now, to some extent, the cameras, especially in terms of lenses compared to last year's, are actually incredibly similar. It is, however, the processing power that makes some differences between last year's iPhone 11. So on the iPhone 12, you've got 3 12-megapixel cameras. One of those is on the front and 2 of those are on the back. All of those are capable of night mode, which is new this year. They can also take night video, and they support up to 4K video at 24, 30 and 60 frames per second. The rear-facing cameras when it comes to video also support Dolby Vision. This is a really impressive new feature, especially if you like video, and I believe a first on a phone. The thing to note, however, is that in order to use that video or watch that video, people need to have devices that can actually process that type of video. This means if you upload it to Twitter, you lose that particular quality about it. Likewise, if you want to edit it at the moment, the only way to edit it is using iMovie either on your phone or iPad or Mac. As someone who uses Final Cut to make videos, I'm just waiting on the update from Apple for that. But what I will say is that the quality of video on these lenses this year is really impressive. It's crisp, it's clear, and it's very smooth as well. The particularly impressive thing about the video is in the low light settings. And it's in these low light settings, perhaps when you've just got a lamp on or when it's a bit dark, that the iPhone video performs really well thanks to that night mode and the extra processing power. If we put it alongside some video shot in low light on my iPhone 10, you really can see the difference. Low light video isn't something I use particularly often, but it is something that I use sometimes, and so being able to get good quality low light video is really, really cool. But for most people, you're probably here to hear about the photo quality. And so let's talk about that, because those two rear-facing cameras can get some incredible shots. Both of those rear-facing cameras are 12 megapixel cameras, and there is a wide and an ultra-wide. The ultra-wide has a 2.4 aperture and the wide has a 1.6 aperture. If you look through the spec on Apple's website, there are tons of features linked to these cameras. But what it is worth saying is that regardless of the light setting that you're in, I have been really impressed with the quality of photos from this phone. If you have a look through the photos that I'm just showing you guys now, these are photos I've taken over the last couple of weeks with this phone. And regardless of light settings, it just seems to perform really well. There's plenty of detail and photos just look crisp and clear with all the colours how you'd expect them to be. Having that option of ultra wide for when you want to fit a little bit more in is also a really nice feature to have. And of course you've got live photos as well, which means you can go back and select a different key shot if you've got that turned on. You can also do cool things like long exposure and bounces with live photos as well. But again, much like the video, where this camera excels is when it comes to low light settings. And even in a kind of fairly dim bedroom just with a corner lamp on, actually it performs incredibly well. And the detail on this cat photo in particular is just so impressive. And as someone who, for the most part, only ever has their iPhone camera with them when it comes to wanting to take photos of things, having a camera that performs well almost every single time is really, really useful. It's probably just worth saying that actually when you're in night mode, the steadier the hand, the better. And that is the iPhone 12. It's super fast, it's got great cameras, and I love the new design. If you're thinking about upgrading, I'd certainly recommend picking one up, although I'd probably recommend trying to bump up to the next memory limit because 64 gigabytes fills up pretty quick. This is especially true if you're going to be taking lots of photos and video. For me personally, as I tend to use phones for a few years, I decided to spend a little bit more and go for the 256 gigabyte model. But ultimately, if you're coming from something like an iPhone 10 or a 10s, you really are going to notice the difference with this new phone. If you're coming from an 11, the question of whether you should upgrade or not is a much bigger question. And it probably lays on whether you like that new design, and that's a must-have, but also whether you really want night mode for video and all of your lenses. I hope you guys have found this video helpful. Do subscribe to this channel. Please consider liking this video. And if you've got any questions, do stick them below. I genuinely try and respond to every comment that I get, especially when you guys ask questions on how to do things. I'll see you guys again soon.